can try and win championships, and that's what it's all about. When you look from the outside and you watch this team, I know we're going to have a real good, solid hockey team this year.
Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Eric Wilson, and today we're taking a look at another potential second-line center that the Rangers could be targeting in free agency this week. So let's go ahead and dive into this Pittsburgh Penguins player, Evgeni Malkin. Know him as Geno Malkin. Pretty good guy, pretty good player. However, does he make a lot of sense for the Rangers? We're going to discuss that. We're going to debate that. But first of all, Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Malkin is definitely an interesting player. I've never been the biggest fan of him as a Rangers fan throughout the years. You know, he's always scoring goals on us, but looking at it from an outside perspective, he is probably the best center on the market right now. Might be a little expensive. He's a little old, so I'm a little skeptical about potentially signing him, but I would say he's definitely a great player. So definitely something worth talking about.
Yes, of course, taking a look at his stats, 2022 season, he played in only 41 games, had a lot of injuries, but he did put up 42 total points, so very productive in the time that he spent on the ice. However, he is 35 years old, and he's wrapping up a deal worth $9.5 million average annual value against the cap. So that huge contract is definitely going to be lowered as, he's 35. He's going on to a new contract here. This is a scenario where the Rangers could consider something short-term with Malkin. A short-term contract, hopefully worth, maybe $5 million average annual value, but it would probably be just a little bit higher than that. Of course, keeping in mind that the Rangers have under $11 million in salary cap space currently. But Eric, what are your thoughts on potentially just a short-term deal to patch up the second line center position?
I would say a short-term deal would be fine. You know, like an average of like 3 to 4 years with Malkin in this case, since he is old and a little injury prone at this stage in his career. The biggest issue with that, though, is just Malkin himself. Would he be willing to take a contract like that? I know Pittsburgh has recently offered a contract similar to that to re-sign him, and he had a little bit of a tantrum about it. Because he got to get his ego in check. He's starting to think that the Penguins don't think he's as good as he used to be, which is true, if I'm being honest. But getting him to sign a short-term contract not worth that much money would be a little difficult.
Yeah, and so reportedly the Penguins did offer him a 3-year, $18 million deal. Negotiations between the two sides have reportedly stalled over length of the contract, not average annual value. So average annual value there would be $6 million, so that would be enough to sign him. But he wants to be signed for maybe 5 years or something. But look, Penguins are looking at him and saying, no, you can get 3 years. I can't imagine the Rangers would come out here and be like, hey, you can get 5 years. But, a 3-year deal seems realistic for a player of this caliber and of this age. And I do think that, this guy is kind of throwing a tantrum, as you mentioned, Alex, because there's some rumors and some kind of reports saying, close friends and teammates are talking to reporters saying that he is, quote, devastated. Quote, he wants to play only in Pittsburgh. He doesn't understand how it's at this point with him not being signed. He said, they don't think I'm a good player. Why? End quote. I think that's a super interesting quote. He is kind of throwing a little bit of a tantrum. He's very upset with the Penguins not being able to sign him, even though they did just offer him a contract for 3 years, $6 million average annual value. I wouldn't complain about that, let me tell you. It seems like they've given him a reasonable offer, so I don't understand why he's saying they don't think I'm a good player. Why? And then complaining that he hasn't been signed. There's a contract out there. He can sign that contract. Eric, what are your thoughts on, him kind of just having a really poor reaction to this contract offer from the Penguins?
It's like you try to see where he's coming from. He's been a superstar in the NHL throughout the entirety of his career. He's won a lot of personal awards. He's won 3 Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he was only the second line center on that team due to the fact that the Penguins had the best player in the world on their team the entire time. Sidney Crosby is their one center. He definitely deserves money. He deserves a lengthy contract. But at this stage in your career, you have to take shorter contracts. No team is going to want to have you locked up till you're 41 years old, 42 years old on a 6 or 7 year contract. You're going to have to take short contracts at this point. I understand if you want to stick to the same team, Pittsburgh Penguins, throughout your entire career, but if they're not offering you the best offer out there, if the Rangers can do something similar, maybe a little better, then I don't understand why you wouldn't take it. I think he just needs to get his ego in check and just take whatever contract is thrown at him, whether it's us, the Penguins, or whoever.
Absolutely. And I think there's going to be a pretty significant market for him. As you mentioned, he is probably the best second line or best center on the market, one of them at least. And there's also more to add to his little tantrum and his frustration with the Penguins. Apparently, Penguins captain Sidney Crosby, you all know him, one of the best players in the NHL, flew out to South Florida to talk to Malkin. Quote, Sid didn't go to convince Malkin to sign. He wanted to check on his friend. He was worried about how hard this is on Gino not feeling wanted anymore, end quote. So he's not feeling wanted by Pittsburgh, and, he's going to be wanted elsewhere. Free agency is right around the corner, just a couple days away. There is going to be a market for this player, and there are going to be teams interested. But should the Rangers be one of those teams interested? Again, 35 years old, 67 goals and 113 assists for 180 points in 177 games. Won 3 Stanley Cups. This is definitely one of the best players in the NHL over the past few years. But Eric, is this worth it? Is he worth a contract that the Rangers would have to give up? $6 million average annual value, maybe 3 years. He's already 35 years old. Does this make sense for the Rangers, in your opinion?
If we could pull off that 3-year, $18 million contract for like $6 million average annual value, I would say, yeah, again, signing a contract that with that much money, we'd have to let go of some players. You could probably say goodbye to Frank Vetrano, probably Ryan Strome, thank God. But we need a second line center. I've said it a million times. It's the number one thing that we need to take care of this offseason, and he would be the perfect fit. Yes, he's old, but for 3 years, that contract would end till he's 38. We have other players signed till they're older. Panarin's going to be on the team for like till he's an old man. Same thing with Chris Kreider. Hopefully Malkin wouldn't have that much of a drop off in his career at this stage. He is 35, so he's going to be 38 by the time that contract would end. But like I said, if we can keep it short, keep it a little cheap, then yes, I think it would be worth it. If he starts asking for 6 or 7 years long, worth more money, then definitely not.
How do you feel that Malkin fits into the Rangers, roster? Like, where does he fit? Obviously, second line center. Do you think his play style gels well with the likes of Artemi Panarin?
Definitely. Panarin's a quick playmaker, always moving along the ice, making these nice stretch passes. And if he can connect with Evgeni Malkin, it would be perfect. Malkin is definitely more of a shoot first type of player. He has an amazing wrist shot. I've seen him score insane goals against the Rangers throughout my days. So that's a little PTSD right there. But definitely he would fit perfect with Panarin. Panarin would do phenomenal getting him the passes that he would need to score. So I think might even increase his point production on playing on our second line with Panarin.
Absolutely. But there is also something to note with, 2022 season, 41 games played, only half of the season played, dealt with a lot of injuries. How much concern do you have about him and his injury? His injuries, he's getting later in his career. Do you think that he's only going to get more injury prone? Because I feel like that could be a concern. You get older, you just start getting hurt more and more frequently. What are your thoughts on injury concerns?
I mean, looking at this past season's a little scary. He only played in half the games throughout the season. I'm not like too well versed on the entirety of his career, if he's been injury prone throughout his entire career in the NHL, or if this was just one like freak injury that he had. But if it's something that's going to continue, it's definitely a very risky. Maybe might make it not worth all the money that we'd be spending on him. But if he can stay healthy, then that would obviously be preferable. But I don't know. He's got to kind of hope that he stays off the injured list and just can play as many games as possible.
Yeah, Malkin's actually dealt with a lot of injuries throughout his career. He's missed a lot of games. Of course, you take a look. Let's see here. Read it out loud. 2012-13, he played in only 31 games. That was a long time ago, I know. But then 2015-16, only 57 games. Then only 62 the following year. He played 78 games in 2017-18. That fell to 68 in 2018-19. That fell even further to 55 total games in 2019-20. And that fell even further to 33 games played in 2020-2021. And then, of course, as we mentioned, 41 games played in 2021-2022. So he has been historically a very injury-prone player throughout the entirety of his career. He's been an extremely productive player, though. 2011-12, 75 games played, 109 total points, led the NHL in points that season, led the NHL in points in 2008 to 2009 with 113. So, of course, every time he's on the ice, he's an extremely productive player. And it seems like maybe he hasn't even lost that much of a step from, 2018, he had 98 points and in 78 games, and then this year he had 42 in 41 games. So he's still productive. He's still putting up the points. He's still scoring. He's still assisting. He's still a phenomenal player and arguably the best player in the free agency market. But for the Rangers, I feel personally as though they're already this close. They're so close to making it to the Stanley Cup Finals. That's how we view this roster. We think it just needs one more piece. This piece, I feel like, on a short-term deal, 3 years, $18 million average annual value, that might make a lot of sense for the Rangers, but that might be a deal that he only considers from the Penguins because of the amount of money. He said the amount of money doesn't really matter when it comes from the Penguins. The $6 million average annual value was fine, but he wants a more long-term deal with the Penguins. He wants to retire with the Penguins. He spent his entire career in Pittsburgh. However, I think that if he goes into the open market, he might ask for some more money, and there might be more teams interested. So there might be a little bit of a bidding war, which would inflate his price. And I could see that $6 million end up becoming somewhere around $8 million just to persuade him to finally leave Pittsburgh. And that's where the Rangers just won't be able to compete with other teams, right? I don't think they'll be able to compete in terms of the money. Again, they only have around $10 million average annual value, or $10 million in cap space. So $8 million average annual value on Evgeni Malkin with 41 games played this past season really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I think the injuries really scare me away from this player. I understand how talented he is, but the injuries are just a major concern with Evgeni Malkin, and I don't think they make it's a perfect pairing with the Rangers. Even though I think he would be phenomenal at that second line center position, I just think the injuries, when you're taking a look at such a young, fast-paced Rangers team, I don't know if they really need some injuries, because what we've been saying is they just need to figure out that second line center position, and that can push them into the Stanley Cup Finals, right? Well, let's say that they get deep in the playoffs and Gino gets injured. I mean, that's a very realistic possibility considering how frequently he's been injured in the past 3 years. So, Eric, what are your final thoughts on Evgeni Malkin and potentially being signed by the Rangers this offseason?
Yeah, after hearing those numbers about all of his injuries and how little games he's played throughout the years, it definitely changes my perspective on it. At 35 years old, that's not a player that we're going to want on the team if he's going to be that injured. We're trying to win now. We don't need someone on the roster who's only going to play a third or a half of the season. And then you also made a great couple of points about how he wants to stay in Pittsburgh. He wants to retire there. It's going to take a lot of work and money to get him onto our team. And if he's known for throwing temper tantrums because he doesn't get what he wants, I know the Rangers have expressed interest in him, but it's not too late to jump ship. I would say just back out as quickly as we can and just don't go anywhere near this guy.
And there you have it. Eric is off the ship. He is jumped ship. He is swimming with the Sharks now, swimming with the Penguins potentially, and that's where Gino will be as well. Hopefully signing with the Penguins and staying far away from the New York Rangers. We don't want, personally, the injury-prone player as our second-line center. But that pretty much wraps it up. Let us know down below in the comment section what you think of the potential of signing Malkin in free agency this offseason. Let us know. Too injury prone, perfect player in your eyes. Let us know down below. We'd love to interact with you all. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Ring the bell so you don't miss a video, and we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Rangers.
He shoots. Rangers.